Hello, my noble band of outlaws. Outlaw Samurai coming at you live with a video on the Hanban forged katana from our friend Outlaw Pimp. The cutting video. Now then. Alright. So, first things first. As you notice, I put a lot of power into those swings. That was because I wanted to see how tiring this thing would be with full power exertion. So far, it's not doing too good. Now, during the first video, you'll see that I did the paper cutting test, which is a standard for edge sharpness. And while this is a serviceably sharp edge, it is not razor edged sharp or hair popping sharp. In fact, we can see here that it is sharp enough to do it. However, this sword, at its current level of sharpness, does not do any favors for the wielder. Because while it is sharp, this is the same level of sharpness that I would expect out of a lesser sword. Let me explain. It has come to my attention that this sword is actually closer to the $400 range because of the fact that it's all custom. The exact price I don't remember at the moment. I have it screenshotted. You can go back to the previous video because I believe Outlaw Pimp posted the comment on that. But as of right now, this sword does not have an edge that I would consider acceptable in a $400 price range. Now, if this had been a stock item in the $200 price range, which I said in the previous video, then I would be more accepting of this edge. However, I have had kitchen knives pass through my hands with a sharper edge than this. Perfect example, as we can see here, if this was a properly sharpened blade, then it would not have these little tears along the edge. It would be much more akin to this precise, controlled cut, which I just performed. Now I hear you say, well, Outlaw, you managed to cut the pool noodle before, why aren't you being able to do it now? And the reason is that a full-size noodle has more weight. Meaning that it has more weight up top to keep it stabilized and hold it in place, instead of folding to one side or the other. Because when the blade makes contact, the first thing it does is push the noodle like this before it starts to cut. Meaning that to prevent the pool noodle from completely bending out of the way, not only do you need proper edge alignment, but also need to be fast and precise. As we see with the ripping and tearing of the secondary side. Swords like this, at the current sharpness level that it has, are not what I would consider a cheat code blade. That means that if you come in at a bad angle or your edge alignment's off, it will still rip through the target and leave a clean cut behind. As I shall now demonstrate. I am going to purposely offset the angle of the blade in the direction that I'm swinging. Okay, bad example of what I was trying to go for, but as we can still see, there's quite a bit of tearing here. Instead of a perfectly flat attempt. And yes, some of this may just be user error on my part, since it's been a minute since I've done any proficient cutting. But at the current, I think there's no way in hell I pulled a damn Musashi and killed a bug mid-swing. For those of you who don't know, the legendary samurai Miyamoto Musashi was said to have been able to catch flies with chopsticks. Chopsticks, I mean. I caught a fly with a sword blade. But yes, I won't stand here and say that it couldn't be user error on my part. But I will say this. I've cut my fair share of noodles with different swords of varying sharpness levels. And while this edge would do well against water bottles or targets of a little more substantial weight, pool noodles are notoriously unforgiving targets. Meaning that if you come in at a weird angle, you will just bounce the pool noodle around instead of cutting it. I'm going to try the experiment again, but a much more exaggerated edge angle. See what I mean by tearing? Now, not to say that this doesn't feel like a good sword. It is well balanced and it feels nice in my hand. But at its current level of sharpness, it's not going to be able to pop through the pool noodles like bat, 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 bat. Or get some of the very thin, precise slices that I've gotten with some of my other swords. If the edge of this sword was touched up and sharpened a bit more, then I have no doubt in my mind that it could be a much better pool noodle cutter. Also, the sword's geometry does not lend it well to this kind of slicey, very fine cutting. The geometry of this blade is much more akin to, I want to say, not so much a chopper. It's not that chunky and stout. But a cutter, if that makes sense. And what I mean by this is there's a difference between slicey, cutter, and choppy in my mind. Choppy is similar to the Warrior O in terms of just brute force, power through, chop down anything that gets in its way. Slicey, I would say, is like my Hanban nanobukucho raptor. And then a cutting sword, in my opinion, would be like my Bayako that I showed in the previous review. The Bayako is actually just ever so slightly wider near the Kisaki than this one is. But the profiles are still close enough that, in my mind, this would be more of a cutter, something to be used against slightly more substantial targets, such as I said before, water bottles and things of that nature, instead of slicey targets like pool noodles, if that makes sense. But overall, the sword is still quite light, easy to maneuver. It's just that it's still a bit too dull to do the slicey actions, and would be much more preferably used as a cutter. Again, slicing. Again, I accentuate the difference between slicey and choppy and cutting in the middle. But we'll see what happens in the review. So until next time, I know a band of outlaws, outlaw samurai tells all y'all be crazy rednecks, be safe, use your weapons. I'm out. Peace.